As Americans cast their ballots, the rest of the world is watching, as the outcome of the election will, of course, have global implications on trade and the economy. Yuka Royer from our business desk is here to tell us more. You've been looking at the two candidates' positions, specifically on tariffs, a word we've heard come out of Donald Trump's mouth a lot in the last few months.
Indeed, Charlie. And we heard that word a lot during Donald Trump's first presidency between 2017 and 2021, as he launched trade wars with China and the European Union and imposed import taxes on goods coming from other nations like Canada. These began in 2018 as his administration slapped tariffs of 25% and 10% on steel and aluminium imports, though some countries later obtained exemptions. It slapped multiple rounds of punitive duties on Chinese products before holding trade talks. Other protectionist measures included duties on solar panels and washing machines. Now, as he seeks a second term, he's going even further, including a blanket tariff on all imports and a much higher duty on Chinese products. On his final day of campaigning, Trump said he'd use tariffs as a tool to pressure Mexico to curb the flow of immigrants and fentanyl into the US. He's been suggesting that revenue from these duties could be used to make up for major tax cuts at home.
And Yuka, how about Kamala Harris? What has she been saying about tariffs?
Well, tariffs aren't covered in her official campaign promises, but she has spoken in support of using targeted tariffs to address economic and security challenges posed by other nations. She's expected to continue with much of her predecessor Joe Biden's policies on this, including a targeted tax on clean energy-related imports from China and a planned expansion of existing steel and aluminium duties. In fact, President Biden has kept most of the Trump-era tariffs in place. Earlier this year, the government even announced tariff hikes on an additional $18 billion worth of Chinese goods, including semiconductors and electric vehicles. A report by the think tank Tax Foundation shows that more revenue from punitive tariffs was collected under Biden administration than during Trump's first term. The same report also estimates that those trade war tariffs will negatively impact America's GDP.
And Europe has also been struggling with competition from China. This a factor in sluggish growth across the continent.
That's right. Well, here in France, there's been a couple of high-profile restructuring plans announced so far this week. Supermarket chain Auchan is cutting more than 2,300 jobs, and tyre maker Michelin has decided to shut down 2 plants in the west of the country, affecting more than 1,200 jobs. It marks the latest cutback in the European auto industry, battling weak demand and cheap Asian competition. Morgan Eyre has more.
Tyre set ablaze at this Michelin factory in Vannes. Workers denounced the decision by the company to close it, along with one other factory. The closures will impact just over 1,200 people working at the sites by early 2026. The tyre maker said the decision was a last resort.
The decision was motivated by 2 reasons. The first one is that Michelin in Europe is the victim of the massive importation of low-cost products from Asia, which puts pressure on a manufacturing strategy in Europe. And on the other hand, the competitiveness of our production in Europe is deteriorating from year to year.
La compétitivité de notre production en Europe se dégrade d'année en année.
Meanwhile, employees at the factory in Cholet blockaded the street and voted to go on strike.
If we don't fight, we won't get anything. We are not going to fight for 35, 40 or 50,000 euros. I can tell you that. We are going to fight to keep our jobs.
Sales in the third quarter dipped 4.2% to almost 6.8 billion euros, down from nearly 7.1 billion a year before. The French group also said it expects its sales volumes to fall 4 to 6% this year. Profits were down 13% year on year in the first half of 2024. Michelin is not the only casualty of a growing crisis in the European auto industry. German parts maker Schaeffler also announced separately on Tuesday that it would cut over 4,000 jobs across Europe.
And finally, Yuka, what's going on with the markets today?
European markets ended the day mixed as investors cautiously await the result of the US presidential election. London ended below the flat line, while Paris and Frankfurt eked out moderate gains, as you can see there, up by about half a percentage point. Wall Street is rallying with the S&P and the Nasdaq both up by more than a percentage point. Traders also await the Federal Reserve's latest monetary policy decision due out on Thursday, with an interest rate cut of a quarter percentage point expected. Shares in aerospace giant Boeing are pulling back after its striking US workers voted to accept a 38% pay raise offer and end their 7-week walkout. And that's it for business for now.